From 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR, this is Lake Effect. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. Today we'll speak with the filmmaker of A Photographic Memory, a documentary about a daughter's journey to learn about a mother she never got to know.
It's not so much that I got to know myself in the process of making the film, but through knowing my mother, I was able to feel like more whole in where I come from. And I think that is part of who we are.
Then we'll learn about Chimney Swifts and the birds' fall migration in a new episode of Chirp Chat.
Hands down, my favorite thing about Chimney Swifts is their swirling tornado roosting behavior that they do each fall.
Plus, we'll feature an in-studio performance by local singer-songwriter Hillary Reynolds. All that's coming up on Lake Effect, but first, here are today's headlines. This is Lake Effect from 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. Thank you for joining us today. Filmmaker Rachel Elizabeth Seed was just 18 months old when her mother, renowned avant-garde journalist Sheila Turner Seed, unexpectedly passed away. Driven by a desire to understand who her mother was, Seed went on a journey to meet with people whose lives were touched by her mother. This journey turned into the documentary A Photographic Memory, which uses extensive audio and photographic archives from Seed's mother. It's a genre-bending portrait of a daughter's attempt to piece together a picture of a mother she never got to know, as both the mother and daughter's worlds merged together in unexpected ways. It'll be showing during Milwaukee Film's Dialogues Documentary Festival, and ahead of that, filmmaker Rachel Elizabeth Seed joins me now to share more. Rachel, welcome to Lake Effect. Thanks for taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you for having me.
So this film, A Photographic Memory, follows your journey to piece together a portrait of your mother, Sheila Turner Seed. And this isn't your first project exploring this theme. In 2005, you traveled around the world to photograph other women who have the same experience of losing their mothers young. So to start, can you tell me more about your explorations of memory and loss, and what led you to going from the 2005 project to then deciding that this needed to be a documentary?
Yeah, I can only speak for myself, but my guess is that for people who lost a parent young, a lot of us have this like unquenchable longing that we live with to know that person or to have that relationship. And because I was always either a writer, photographer, filmmaker, one or some combination of those things, that was the way that I felt it was natural to try to come to terms with my loss. So initially that was in the form of, finding other women who lost their mothers young. It was like under the age of 20, and some of them were actually children. And I think I interviewed and photographed about 40 altogether. I received several grants. I traveled around the world to do it. And it took form both as a multimedia installation, as photography exhibits. I made a book. And it was comforting to meet so many other people that had, that experience. Obviously, difficult for each one of us. And I think at the end of that project, the longing I had did not go away. Whatever I was seeking, it was comforting, but it wasn't satisfying enough for me. And so just a few years later, when I discovered my mother's interviews with photographers and some of her work, I just, in a flash one day in 2011, had this sort of crazy idea that it could be a feature film, sort of the story of finding her interviews and reconnecting with her through all these things she created. I'm in the exact same professions that she was in, and I use the same mediums and tools that she used, which I didn't even fully know until I made the film and I discovered more about her work. And so it kind of had this meta element as well of, getting to know her through her writing, through her photographs, through her interviews, while I was also writing and photographing and interviewing people. And so the themes of memory, the themes of like why and how do we use cameras and photography to preserve people, to try to come to terms with what we've lost or things that we're trying to hold on to, our own mortality, the how ephemeral life is, and how do we accept that as human beings, all these existential quandaries that we have. So all those are sort of built into my exploration as well. And it became this multi-layered feature-length film.
As you mentioned, with your mother being a photographer and a journalist, there was a wealth of primary materials for you to explore and to use. You mentioned your mother's seminal project. It's called Images of Man. How did you originally come across her work for that big project? And even though it was her work, you felt her voice was missing. So how did you want to use that project as a centerfold for what you were exploring?
So I was getting really into photography myself. It was sort of like my second career after being a writer and working in publishing. And one day at my dad's house, I noticed, I mean, I always knew these things were lying around, but sometimes in life, like there's a certain moment where all of a sudden, like a light bulb goes off or you're more interested in something. And so because I was getting into photography, I noticed these boxes of interviews, slideshows my mother made called Images of Man, where she interviewed some of the greatest photographers of the 20th century. And in finding those, I was like, there have to be longer interviews. Like they were only like 15 minutes each that she edited. So I was like, there's probably at least, an hour or two or three of her talking to these photographers. And so my interest in them had these different layers. One was that I was a photographer and I wanted to hear the interviews and hear her talking to photographers about their work. But more importantly, I wanted to hear her voice, her asking questions, and thought that maybe I could glean more about her through listening. And so that sort of set me off on a journey to find them. Turns out they were all at the International Center of Photography, where they'd been for decades, sort of as a time capsule. I think she's the only person who ever actually listened to the whole things besides me at this point. So that moment of finding those set me off on the whole film, unbeknownst to me at the time that it would become this long journey in film. But that was what started it.
Yeah, a line from your film is, quote, "The photos of us couldn't capture the real memory, which was your voice." So upon finding the original audio interviews, how did you feel listening to that first tape with your mom, Sheila's voice?
I think I went into it with some, not hesitation, but like a slight fear that it could be like creepy or haunting or something, because it just felt like this huge deal to me. And then when I sat down and listened, I actually felt comforted by her voice, and it also was familiar to me. So it just made me also start questioning, like, well, what is a memory? Like, I thought it was something we consciously know that we have. Um, Obviously it's beyond that. And so all of a sudden I was like, wait, I remember her voice, but I didn't realize I would. So that was just one more layer of like, what is memory that's explored in the film. And it's not just a film about photography, it's a film about all these different like mediums and memory and what we're searching for, as people and what can help us find it.
I do want to take a moment to talk about your great narrative writing in this film. Obviously, this is such a personal exploration, and you're sharing very intimate thoughts and realizations with the audience, as we're kind of on this journey with you in real time as we're all watching it. So, what was your process of writing these reflections? Was it as you were editing the final version, or did you always write these down as a stream of consciousness that you would then pick and choose from for the final edit? Because it pairs so well, but I can only imagine the massive lift it took to edit and organize this.
Yeah, it was super intense, super labor intensive, so many iterations. And I would say it's a combination of things. So, like, from probably the early days of making the film, I would write down, like, if I had like an idea of something that happened or something I thought should be in the film, I would just write about it. But I was used to writing more like for print and not so much for narrative delivery. And also, I'm not an actor. So I think like one of the biggest challenges was like taking my sort of more, things that were more for print writing, and then how does that actually sound when it's delivered? So that was one of the biggest lifts. I had pages and pages and pages of such writing to work with. But what ended up happening was like the last year and a half of the film, I worked with my partner slash editor and co-writer. His name is Christopher Stout. And once we like settled on actual scenes that were going to be in the film, then oftentimes I would have to go into my cave and write something fresh. And so there was a whole new writing process that happened on top of like the continuous writing process. And then it would be like, then you deliver it. And does it actually sound good when you say it? Does it sound like something I would say? And I wanted it to be authentic. And I think in like a personal documentary, narration is so important and it has to feel natural. It has to feel like your voice. And a lot of people just don't naturally know like what is my voice, in terms of writing for a film. So that was a whole like learning curve that was honestly the most challenging part creatively for me of the film. And personally just having to like go into a narration booth and like say these things over and over again that were painful things too. It was the hardest part for me.
One thought I had watching this film and learning more about you and your mother, Sheila, was that, because you lost her so young, you only got to explore who she was as a person and a working professional, because people who grow up with both sets of parents or a parent, it takes you into adulthood to realize like, oh, they're a person too, right? You just see them
Right.
as your maternal or paternal figures. And you got to really explore her and, like all these struggles that you can relate to as an adult woman as well. And how did you feel getting to know her through this lens? Granted, I know you long for those childhood memories too, but to get to know your mother as a person first, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. Yeah, because I've had people at screening say like they don't know their parent. Like I know my parent so much better than they do, and they like grew up with their parent. So I think like I had the unique experience of like reading 14 of my mother's journals, of interviewing all these people that knew her really closely, including her exes. And most people don't do that with their parents. I feel like I know my mother in a way, like I'm an expert on her life, but I don't necessarily know what it would be like just to sit and have like a normal conversation with her, which is why I created that conversation in the film. Because I think that's really what I was longing for was like just that day to day or that connection. But I also talked to people that were close to her personally and who knew her as a mother. I also had her audio talking to me as a baby. So I think like I did get to know her in both ways, which I think I needed to do. If it had just been professional, something would have been missing for me. But I needed to know like how did she feel about being a mother? How was she with me? What was she like as a mother? And I did actually also learn those things. So I think what I actually got was her as like a full person, maybe more so than people do of their parents, but still missing, the day to day, which is obviously this very crucial part of that relationship. But I like to think I have like a holistic view of who she was. Also in her journal, she writes about wanting to be a mother. She writes about being a mother after I'm born. Not very much because she stopped journaling, but a little bit, enough that I got a sense of it.
A big question at the heart of a photographic memory is, quote, how could I know myself if I didn't know you? And you said that you felt your obsession with this story kept you stuck in the past, but now that the film is completed and you're sharing it with audiences, how do you view it now or view that question?
It absolutely released me from that being stuck in the past. So, and I wrote those lines at the end of the process of making the film. So that was like a funny, like meta thing of the process was like, I can't actually finish the film until I finish the process of getting to know my mom. But yeah, it was all kind of wrapped up together. I think I needed to go through that whole process. It did release me from the past. It's not so much that I got to know myself in the process of making the film, but through knowing my mother, I was able to feel like more whole in where I come from. And I think that is part of who we are. I think people who don't know their parents or perhaps either are adopted or whatever the circumstance may be, I don't know if as human beings, I don't know that we can fully like know who we are without knowing where we come from. That's just my own sense, or at least that was true for me. So I think it gave me a great confidence and it also gave me a great fulfillment in feeling like I have a relationship with my mom now that I didn't have before, which was not a guaranteed outcome of my journey that I went on, but it did actually happen.
I mean, overall, this film was, I feel very fortunate to have watched it and that you are letting people in to get to know you and your mother better. So, Rachel Elizabeth Seed, thank you so much for joining me today to talk about A Photographic Memory.
Thank you very much for having me.
Rachel Elizabeth Seed is the director and producer of the documentary A Photographic Memory. It'll be showing at the Oriental Theater on Friday, September 19th as a part of Milwaukee Film's Dialogues Documentary Festival. Seed will be attending the screening for a filmmaker Q&A, and you can find more information at wuwm.com. Milwaukee Film is a financial supporter of WUWM. Did you know you can listen to Lake Effect as a podcast? Search for Lake Effect wherever you get your podcasts to download and listen on demand. In about 15 minutes, we'll have some new music from local singer-songwriter Hillary Reynolds. But first, we'll learn about Chimney Swifts in a new episode of Chirp Chat. That's next on Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM. You're listening to Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM. I'm Audrey Nowakowski, and I'm calling all Swifties. Chimney Swifts are back in town, and you could catch their spectacular show at a chimney near you. The small, fast-flying birds are known for the tornado-like dance they perform in the sky. Brenda Marsacek is the director of outreach with the Southern Wisconsin Bird Alliance. She says that at dusk, the birds will dive head first into a chimney to roost, sometimes by the thousands. Marsacek joins Lake Effect's Excret Nunez for this month's Chirp Chat to learn more about swifts and what's being done to protect them.
Fall migration is already in full swing, and among the birds migrating to warmer climates from and through Wisconsin are chimney swifts. Brenna, before we dive in to talk about how spectacular these birds are, what is it about chimney swifts that fascinates you?
Hands down, my favorite thing about chimney swifts is their swirling tornado roosting behavior that they do each fall. And we can go into that more in a little while. And the way that they sound. I love their calls. They make a high-pitched kind of twittering, fast, repetitive, bubbly noise, and it just sounds like happiness to me when I hear it. It's always, from above because they're almost always flying. So it's a fun thing to hear and then look up and have that audio experience confirmed by seeing the swifts darting around above you.
I was just going to say, I love how you describe, the swirling vortex of chimney swifts. But for folks who aren't familiar with chimney swifts, can you describe what they look like?
They have a really distinct body shape. Their nickname is a flying cigar. So if you can picture what a cigar looks like, where it's kind of oval shaped and stubby, and that's kind of what the body of a chimney swift looks like. They have a short tail. Their beaks are short and pointy. They have really long wings for their body size, which helps them be super acrobatic flyers. So when you see them flying, you can tell right away that it's a chimney swift. If you have that image in mind of the flying cigar, you can tell that that's what you're looking at.
And you mentioned that they have tiny bills. What do they eat?
Yeah, that tiny bill is an indicator of their diet. So usually birds that have small or short and pointy beaks are insectivores. And that's what chimney swifts are. They're called aerial insectivores because they eat almost exclusively insects and they eat almost entirely while flying. They eat lots of different types of insects. They can eat flies and wasps and beetles, maybe some mosquitoes, but they're usually flying a little bit higher up. So whatever insects are up higher in the air column is what they're eating. And I recently read that they can use their bills to catch a larger insect that they can eat. But with smaller insects, it just goes straight down the hatch while they're flying. So they fly with their mouths open and they just swallow them right while they're flying.
That's amazing. And like I mentioned earlier, chimney swifts have already started to migrate out of Wisconsin. Can you tell me more about their migration patterns?
Typically, we start seeing chimney swifts in Wisconsin in April or so. They come from a long ways away. So they spend their winters in South America in the Amazon basin. So in countries like Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Brazil, they migrate around 3,000 miles to get to places like Wisconsin for their nesting season. So they spend their summers in the eastern half of the United States, east of the Rockies, more or less, and even into southern Canada. So this is where they nest. They nest in chimneys and in silos and other, originally they would have nested in like a hollow dead tree prior to the construction of all these chimneys. But now chimneys are just kind of the perfect habitat for them, so they often use them for nesting and roosting. So they arrive in Wisconsin in April, they spend their summers here, and then typically late August through September is when they migrate back down to the Amazon basin.
So you mentioned nesting and roosting. For people who aren't familiar with those terms, what's the difference between the two?
So nesting is when two adults will build a nest, and with chimney swifts, that's built on the inside of a chimney. It's like a half of a small bowl that you would imagine in your kitchen cupboard. They build that out of twigs and spit, and they stick it to the side of the chimney on the inside. And they lay their eggs and raise their young from this spot. And there are other adults that will sometimes fly in and out and bring food and help with that nesting, but there's only one nest per chimney. Roosting is different in that that's when big flocks of swifts will come together and come down from flying and just cling and sleep inside of a chimney for the night. So that is typically many, many swifts inside of one chimney per night. They're not raising young, they're just coming together to sleep for the night, probably because with so many of them being in the chimney, they can help each other stay warm and avoid predators. So if there's a flock of hundreds or thousands of swifts, it's power in numbers. It's more challenging for a predator to target, one particular bird as it's coming out of the chimney.
Definitely. And do you know if chimney swifts stay in the same chimney all season long, or every year do they return to the same chimney?
For nesting, it's hard to say. They may have some nest fidelity. And as far as roosting goes, there is a lot of evidence that shows that swifts will use the same, they know the good chimneys for roosting while they're migrating. And so they consistently use a lot of these chimneys year to year. Whether it's the same exact birds, I'm not sure, but it's a common practice for them to return to these important roosting chimneys year after year. So I think it's just more about the opportunity, whether there's a chimney available to them to nest in.
So say that someone sees this, this huge swift NATO swirl in the sky. Are they as abundant as people might think?
That's a really important question. So chimney swifts are not as abundant as they used to be. And what these swift NATO, these swirling vortexes that happen before they come into roost, what that might give the illusion of, because they were just this year classified as a tipping point species in the 2025 State of the Birds report. So that means that they have lost more than 50% of their population in the last 50 years. And they were classified as an orange alert, which means that they're down by 50% and their declines have sped up a lot in the last 10 years. So that's a really serious problem for chimney swifts. And we think that it's because they are losing habitat, which for chimney swifts is chimneys and other places that they could roost, like hollow trees or silos. These are things that are less abundant on the landscape now than they used to be. And because they're aerial insectivores. And we know that the insect population is down, and as a result, so are the animals that rely on these insects.
Right. That makes sense. I'm Lake Effect's Excret Nunez, speaking with Brenna Marsacek about chimney swift conservation. So we've been talking about how amazing chimney swifts are, but they are a vulnerable species. You've listed some of the biggest threats to their population. What are some things being done to help chimney swifts? It's clear that protecting roosting sites is super important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a great question because it's really solutions focused and what we can do to reverse this trend. And fortunately, there are things. So some of it has to do with chimneys. If there are old chimneys that need to be maintained, sometimes that's pretty expensive. So, helping fund chimney maintenance and restoration is a great way to keep these large roosting chimneys in operation and available to swifts during their migration so that they can come down and roost. Home chimneys are a bit complicated, right? Because they are often capped to exclude critters like raccoons and birds, and that includes chimney swifts just by default, because once it's capped, the chimney swift can't get in there to nest or to roost. So there are ways to avoid capping that prevents, rain from coming in, but allows chimney swifts to be able to enter. And if you have a chimney that is not capped and not lined with a metal liner, making sure that the chimney is cleaned out or swept during non-nesting periods, in early April or after the summer's end, that's a great way to make sure that the chimney is not full of soot and gunk on the inside walls, because that can cause the nest to kind of slip and fall off. As aerial insectivores, another thing that we can do for them is to plant native plants, because native plants support many times more insects than ornamental plants do. And along those lines, reducing or eliminating use of pesticides at home or in areas that we can control is really important for that same reason. And then I'd also say that participating in or hosting even Swift Night Out events is a really great way to just raise that community awareness of this important, awesome bird that does this amazing thing and what their conservation needs are. So, it introduces people to what these birds are, helps them fall in love with them like so many people do when they watch these Swift Night Out events, and then maybe do some work to help protect them as well.
Well, Brenna, we've reached the end of Chirp Chat, which is when I usually ask people to highlight a bird for the month. But for this episode, I'd like to ask you, in addition to chimney swifts, what's another bird you're keeping an eye out for during this fall migration?
Good question. I'm going to say nighthawks, common nighthawks. This is a really fun time. And actually, it's a great pairing with chimney swifts, because nighthawks are often flying around in similar areas at similar times as when chimney swifts form this swirling vortex of birds that go into the chimney at night. So when you see a bigger bird that has white bars underneath its wings flying around near chimney swifts, that is a common nighthawk, and they're also wonderful birds that are really fun to spot. So I'm keeping an eye out for those as well.
I will too. Well, Brenna, thanks so much for talking to me today and telling me more about how important chimney swifts are and how to protect them.
Thank you. It's been great talking with you, and thank you to everyone listening.
Brenna Marzacek is the Director of Outreach with the Southern Wisconsin Bird Alliance, formerly known as Madison Audubon. She spoke with Lake Effect's Excret Nunez for a monthly series we call Chirp Chat, which you can find as a podcast wherever you like to listen to your podcasts. We'll take one more break, and we'll return with an acoustic studio session with local singer-songwriter Hillary Reynolds. Keep listening to Lake Effect on Milwaukee's NPR. You're listening to Lake Effect on Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. Songwriter Hillary Reynolds splits her time between her hometown of Appleton, Wisconsin, and Los Angeles. Her songs have been recorded by Little Big Town and Danny Rose and can be heard on Yellowstone and Loudermilk. However, over the past 5 years, Reynolds has been working on her debut album, Changing Seasons, which is full of songs that felt too personal to write for other musicians. They're meant to be a soothing companion to our morning routines and help ease us into a new day. Reynolds joins me in the Lake Effect Performance Studio, and we'll start with listening to her song, Everything You Fear.
You are bold and you are brave, so why are you hiding in your shade? Even when demons haunt your past, you've got love in your bones. So don't believe everything you fear. My love can hold you. I'm here. The river may weep and the tide may rise, but that's how you know that you're alive. I love the cracks in your tender voice, and I've always loved your sadness. So don't believe everything you fear. My love can hold you. I'm here. I'm here. It gets hard before it gets easier. Just breathe through the pain, and you will smile again. Just close your eyes and clear your head, and let our song become your friend. Even when your mind is fighting back, and I'm not there to hold you. Don't believe everything you fear, 'cause my love, I told you. Don't believe everything you fear, 'cause my love can hold you. And it's okay to shed a couple tears, 'cause my love will find you. I'm here.
Hillary Reynolds, welcome to Lake Effect. Thank you for that song. That was lovely.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So, with this being your first time on our program, I just kind of want to introduce you to the listeners in case they're not familiar. And you are from Appleton,
I
here in
am.
Wisconsin, and
Mhm.
currently live in LA as a songwriter. But to start, can you share more about your local roots and
Yeah.
your background? What got you inspired to get into music?
Well, I was born in Appleton in a very musical family. And my dad, my aunt, my other uncle, two of my uncles, and my dentist all have a band together called Baba Ganoush. And we call them Baba. They still play around the area. But I grew up listening to them in bars and
Yeah.
barn dances.
The kid with the Shirley Temple at the bar, right?
Yeah. And for the longest time, I really thought that Down by the River, Heart of Gold, like all of my favorite Neil Young songs
Mhm.
were written by them. And I was kind of like devastated when I discovered in high school. I was like, wait a second. they didn't write these masterpieces. But
Yeah.
we had a great time growing up. And I think that it was just sort of a part of family gatherings. I remember nights there, being out on frozen lakes in the chain of lakes in Wapaka where my grandparents retired. And we'd have a fire going on the lake because the ice was thick enough. And then, somebody would bring a guitar out inevitably. And that's just kind of how it is and was. So
born to play. in
loved
some
it.
ways.
Yeah.
Remind me, you split your time now
I
between
do
Wisconsin
now.
and LA?
I do now.
And what went into the decision to move to LA? Do you feel like you had to move away in order to like truly be a songwriter and be able to make a living in the industry, thrive? Was it hard to do that here?
I think that Wisconsin, music-wise, was a very different place when I was growing up. And I think that really the limitations were like, playing bar gigs. And I think I just wanted to know, I had a curiosity about like what else is out there. And so when I went to Berklee College of Music in Boston, I just took the scholarship and ran with it and just sort of immersed myself in a totally different state and on a different coast. And then the move to LA sort of came when I realized that the limitations of being a musician in Boston were more like cover band stuff and wedding bands, and people make awesome living doing that. But I really fell in love with songwriting. And so when it came to picking a city, it was like, you either go to Nashville or you go to New York or you go to LA. And my now husband, but partner at the time, he really didn't want to go to Nashville. And I really didn't like New York. And so we just sort of jumped into LA, eyes wide open, just seeing what it would be like. And we fell in love with it. And I love it out there. I really do. Which I know is hard for some Wisconsinites to hear, but it is really a wonderful place.
Right. And well, we did know you do spend your time here and you're here with us today. So not all Wisconsin points are lost by any means.
Thank you.
And years between this, but jumping ahead to now with your latest album, Changing Seasons, having worked on this album for more than 5 years, I'm curious, can you share your mindset of when you were first getting into it? What you wanted this body of work to be, to reflect?
Yeah, that's a really thoughtful question. When I first was getting into this album, I think what struck me most was that I had spent a couple years just solely writing for other people and other artists and other projects and Lifetime movies and just trying to make a living out in LA, getting grounded, teaching lessons and all that stuff. And I think there were just a lot of precious songs that I had written that over the course of many years that I knew I wanted to do something with, but I didn't want to give them away. There were a couple on this album where in the writings of it, like the voice memo that I have on my phone is me crying through it. And that's when I know it's my song, first and foremost.
That was one of my questions, like, how do you know what's for you and what's for others?
It's like pathetic, it's I should really delete them. But so my mentality was capture this time. And I kind of didn't know. I recorded, I think, did basics for 28 or 30 songs and started kind of whittling away at maybe themes or what did I want the sonic experience to be? Because there were some more, I would say, eclectic rock expressions, but I was like, I'm just not feeling that. And I kind of, over the course of the years, just whittled it down to 8 and decided to take a stance and just say, I'm doing a morning record. I'm doing an album that lowers my blood pressure. And I'm not going to take the commercial stance that I became really familiar with in the process of writing in sessions with a producer and maybe 2 other writers. I just didn't care about that with this album.
Like you said, kind of like gifting yourself this album, like your future self.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear more of it.
Sure.
So would you mind introducing the next song and anything you want to share about it before we hear it?
Oh, yeah. So this song is called Can't Turn Off My Mind. And I wrote it about, I would say, insomnia and daydreaming and the ruminating things that happen and, seeds of thoughts that just sort of take place between 3 and 5 a.m. And it was a song I had written before I became a mother. And I had co-written it with my very good friend, Madison Malone, who's also a Wisconsinite from Portage, Wisconsin. But we sat down and she helped me finish it. And since then, we've both become mothers. So I feel like this song has just kind of taken on a whole new meaning.
Excellent. Well, you're listening to Lake Effect. I'm Audrey Nowakowski with Hillary Reynolds, and we're about to hear Can't Turn Off My Mind from her latest album, Changing Seasons.
Sun's coming up to shine, you're still sleeping. I've been up all night for no reason, and I can't turn off my mind. Lately I've been lost in contradictions, running wild in my imagination. Ooh, ooh, ooh. And I can't turn off my mind. A table set for two, your mouth is moving, but I'm not listening to what you're saying. Oh, honey, I'm on the moon tonight. Ooh, ooh, ooh. And I can't turn off my mind. Overanalyzing everything you say. My indecision follows every move I make, but I'm not here, I'm not here. Caught in silence as I think about the day. My constant daydreams take me somewhere far away, but I'm not here, I'm not here. I'm not here, I'm not here. Mind is on and far away, somewhere deep in outer space, and I can't turn off my mind.
That was Hillary Reynolds playing Can't Turn Off My Mind. Thank you for that. It was beautiful.
Thank you.
So I'd like to get into a little more about the instrumentation of the album. I know listeners
cool.
are hearing the acoustic version today, which
Yes.
is also lovely. But can you share more about your arrangements with these songs, and given the wide span of time and attention and kind of the different periods you went through to produce this album?
Sure. Oh, that's a fun one to answer. So on this album, it features people playing instruments, and I feel like that maybe
Real
needs
people.
to be said
Yeah.
these days. Unfortunately, it's a human-made album with people playing together live, and features a lot of my favorite tonalities. And so a lot of acoustic guitars, a lot of doubles, acoustic guitars, and mandolin and octave mandolin, which I think octave mandolin is just such a beautiful little secret. We did a lot of different setups of drums, percussion, auxiliary percussion, and on Can't Turn Off My Mind in particular, that one features upright bass. My producer, Benjamin Koff, is just a beautiful upright bass player, but also I love his time, I love his feel, and he played a lot of the acoustic guitar tracks as well. So I think that's why it just feels so good. It's because of him. Like he brought it into such a grounded place. The electric guitar work and strings that are used, I usually, in previous iterations of a band, I've worked really closely with a cellist, and he played on this album, but it was the first time I used it more as a texture as opposed to a part. And that was just a different feeling, because what I really looked at in terms of the sonic scape of this, I was trying to imagine, like, if Jane Austen and Beatrix Potter made an album, like, how could it fit those really beautiful dewy colors and morning, magic? And so I think those were the main ways to achieve that.
Are mornings your most creative time, or do you feel like a certain affinity to them?
I think, okay, so I'm thinking about 3 distinct chapters, because before having my son, I was more of a night owl person. But I'm currently pregnant with my second, and I just escaped the black hole of the first trimester, which was just a great time to release a record, a great time to play shows. Let me tell you, the nausea and the fatigue. Wow, I was absolutely superwoman. But I would say that now my most productive hours are in the morning. And when I hit 4 o'clock, I am a potato. I can't be bothered to do anything except for the nighttime routine with Augie, my son, and then just go to bed myself. So
I feel you on that.
Yeah.
Well, and speaking of little ones, you also have an author to add to your bio. You co-wrote a children's book called Send My Love. Can you share a bit more about the book and what inspired you to venture down this creative outlet outside of music?
Well, I didn't set on creating a children's book. I really didn't. It was a rainy day along the Oconto River in Stiles, Wisconsin, where my husband's parents, they have a cabin there. And it's been a point of refuge for me for as long as I can remember, but especially during the pandemic. And it was a really rainy day, and I had just what I think a lot of writers can attest to having, which is just a random download of words. And usually when that happens, I'm like, oh, it's a song, cool. But then I was looking at it, and I was like, this doesn't feel like a song. Maybe it's a poem. Did I just write a poem? But then I was texting a good friend of mine who's also from Wisconsin, Catherine, the co-author, and I said, I think I've written a poem, and I sent her the words. And later that night, I was like, actually, no, I think this is a children's book. And her and I just quickly finished the manuscript within a few months. And then she had this idea of connecting with a Wisconsin artist and illustrator, Hannah Ribbons, and we just did some Zoom meetings. She presented some sketches, and the rest is history. We just sort of were like, okay, this is our passion project. This is something that's going to get us through these times. And the spring of this last year was when it was finally complete. And our publishers, Orange Hat Publishing, which is it's a Wisconsin-based publisher. So we're just
hometown book.
We're just going to make it a Wisconsin book.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
Well, I want to first off thank you so much for spending some time here with me today and sharing some music. Can you take us out with one more? What are you going to play?
Yes. This is a song called No One Knows I'm Here. And I think of it as a song that I love to play when I'm just alone in the woods by myself and feeling just free and like my 5-year-old self. So it feels appropriate to share at the heels of talking about a children's book.
Excellent.
It's only the wind on my back. The sun is running through the trees. And I feel like a child again, just singing for the waterfall in me. And no one knows I'm here. No one knows
Hillary Reynolds is a singer-songwriter from Appleton, and her debut album out now is called Changing Seasons. She's also the co-author of a children's book, Send My Love. Our studio session was engineered by WUWM's Jason Reevy, and you can hear all 3 acoustic tracks Reynolds performed at WUWM.com. And that's Lake Effect for today. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. Joy Powers, Sam Woods, and X-Grid Nunez join me in producing Lake Effect each week with help from Rob Larry and Graham Thomas. Becky Mortensen is our executive producer. Emily Files helps edit the show. We also heard from Mayan Silver, Susan Bentz, and Jimmy Gutierrez from the WUWM news team this week. Jason Reevy is our studio engineer. Michelle Maternowski is our digital manager. Valeria Navarro-Villegas is our digital editor. Trapper Chef wrote our theme music. If you've missed any of Lake Effect this week, you can find all of our conversations at WUWM.com. If you'd like to take the show on the go, simply download the Lake Effect podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Join us again on Monday at noon when we'll check in with a homeowner who was impacted by last month's historic flooding, and we'll learn about a project aimed at preventing future flooding in Milwaukee. Thank you so much for joining us today, right here on listener-supported 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR.
And I can scream and let it die.